one of our most popular shows. I'm looking forward to hearing what our hacker has to say on this particular show. He's a good friend and definitely a great mind in terms of finances and all along those lines. And a lot of folks wonder why watch the hacker. Well, one, it's one of our very popular shows. It gets all kinds of views on TikTok. It has interesting stories you won't get elsewhere. It even got some dividend picks of the week and all along those lines. And of course, we've got the hacker himself. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Peter Bennett, who's got a BA in economics from UCLA, a law degree from the University of Miami Law School, and an MBA in finance from NYU. And he's worked on that Tower of Power, Wall Street, and in finance for 17 years. So he definitely knows what he's talking about and all along those lines. And definitely we have some other folks on the shows that don't always know what they're talking about. So it's always good to have an expert that is good at this field and knows what they're talking about. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Peter's got to say about a number of these issues because finances is something that we all need to do better at. I know that I'm not even always good in my own finances and everything, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Peter, and you can give them some great hacks and all along those lines. But you know, you're an amazing part of the Pod TV family, and I'm always glad to see you and learn from you as well. So I'm gonna sit back until you call me back when the toward the end and everything. But I'm looking forward to learning from you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. You always do such a great introduction. I appreciate it. We'll see you back when we have the panel discussion of the week, too. So thank you very much, Mark, for that introduction. So welcome to Wall Street Hackers, September 9th, 2025. You can catch a new episode of Wall Street Hackers most weeks at starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, depending, then it runs for the week, depending on when you're watching. But that said, we're taking a seasonal break with this show, and the next show will be starting Tuesday, October 14th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or following that on the week. So stay tuned. We'll see you on October 14th, but this show will be running repeatedly in the meantime. So we first start with the markets, and I had everything prepared, and I'm still going to read that because in some ways, what I'm going to tell you about today's news amplifies what I was going to say anyway about certain aspects of uncertainty in the market. But this morning, I heard that it was a, quote, preliminary preview. The Bureau of Labor Statistics was going to announce a 911,000 reduction in terms of a revision in the job numbers for the last few months. And I'm not sure the exact time period, but that's a gigantic revision in the job numbers. So that was enough that I was going to mention it and add to this morning's paper that I wrote. But then just now, a few minutes ago, I heard that under Biden, they are now revising retroactively the jobs created by 1.7 million jobs. This is, I believe, unprecedented. It's amazing. And so there's a few footnotes on that. One is it incompetence that they did this? Their methodology seemed way off. I think they've been way outdated. The other side is some people are saying, well, the Biden claims of creating so many jobs were inflated, and maybe there was political pressure on the BLS. I don't know. There might be an investigation. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Going forward, because we're more interested in investing in today's politics and world, the implications are pretty large because the Fed has been arguing with President Trump, and President Trump has been arguing to the Fed, I should say, that they need to lower interest rates. And Wall Street Hackers has seen a lot of signs of the economy slowing. And I was personally wondering, how is it that strong when housing sales are down and there's a lot of office vacancies, a lot of problems? And it's not like it's all collapsing. I mean, unemployment, as a footnote, you don't have to get scared, is 4.3%, which is historically low still. But these revisions will definitely, it guarantees at least a quarter point Fed cut, and probably more than we've been predicting, because Wall Street Hackers was assuming BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, was giving legitimate numbers. So maybe we'll see more rate decreases, and that should help the market. On the other side, now the market has to be worrying about a slowing economy. So it's always two sides. So that's it. I'm going to get into what I had prepared, but it kind of, as I said, is amplified by today's pretty surprising news. After years of certainty in the market, for years it was so clear. We were just in growth. Everything was clear. We're in a period that in the short run is unusually difficult to predict, and there's more uncertainty than usual, amplified again by today's report. So this is what happens in general, in the big picture, when the market is one at its almost highest historical values, or highest in history. That's repeating the word history, but it's a historical. When you're at the historical high, you can't expect quite the same returns as when you're undervalued. The market is probably overvalued. I'm not saying you're going to get low returns, but if you look at the forecasts of Schwab, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs, they were forecasting returns of 3 to 6% over the next decade annually, which is not terrible, but that's not what people had been used to in the market. And the bottom line here is this is what happens when, one, you're at historically high valuations, and there's probably what's called regression to the mean. In other words, it averages out. And two, when you have a government that has been building debt for 50 plus years and has huge unfunded liabilities for Medicare and Social Security, the number one number we say all the time is the U.S. actual debt and obligations is probably $125 trillion in present value, not the $37 trillion they're counting, because all the Medicare and Social Security liabilities, a lot of them are off the books. And that is confirmed by the Comptroller General of the United States, who on Economics Monday on that show, who I sometimes visit. So bottom line there's so much debt. It's phenomenal. And the politicians have been kicking the can down the road for 50 plus years. And I can't even blame them fully, because on one side, they shouldn't have done it. On the other side, there's political pressure to it. How are you going to tell people, we're promising you too much? We're promising you everything. You can retire with medical benefits and it's not going to affect the economy. It's not an easy job, politics, in a way, because you have to balance out popular opinion versus doling out the benefits. But on the other side, in the end, I think they should have done more of the right thing. And now President Trump and the Congress is doing a lot to cut spending, to grow the economy. They're doing mostly the right things, by sure. But, when you build up a problem for 50 years, it doesn't necessarily go away in 1, 2, or 4 years, but at least they're taking the right steps. So we will see. And to leave this part on a positive note, this doesn't mean you can't make money in the market. I mean, 3 to 6%, okay, that's an average, and we hope to do much better than that. But it also emphasizes that the historical method, which is the Wall Street hackers method, of focusing on income generators, dividend stocks, which far outperform other stocks over studies that have run up to 100 years, and we've talked about it on other shows, is the way to go. You want defensive balance sheets, high cash flows, income generation. Look, if there's massive inflation and you have income generation, at least you can reinvest at higher rates. If you have a lot of cash flow and the economy goes south and rates are coming down, at least you have high cash flows and you've locked in the cash flows. So kind of a no lose as long as you're in a defensive sector and a defensive balance sheet. And that's our philosophy. So here's the quote of the week, all from Mott Capital Management, who I follow among others, many. And this is our most likely scenario. I hate to say it, but stagflation is quite possible because of this massive debt and because of so many other trends in the economy. You have demographic trends on one side, like aging population. It's deflationary, but you have inflationary trends like printing money that's going to be happening. So here's the quote. This week, again, selected quotes, this week could bring the Fed's worst nightmare, stagflation. Footnote, this is really true. The July and August jobs report revealed unexpected weakness, shifting market focus from inflation to employment concerns. The footnote is, this was written maybe yesterday, September 7th, 2 days ago, before a 1.7 million revision. It's amazing, but it was right on point anyway. So July and August jobs report revealed unexpected weakness. Again, 4.3% isn't that bad, but it's not going the right way. Massive downward revisions to previous job numbers heightening investor anxiety and confirmed a softer labor market. Those revisions were tiny compared to these. Despite rising inflation forecasts, the Fed is likely to cut rates to support the weakening job market. True, even more so now. And headline and core inflation CPI are expected to rise in August, but the Fed prioritizes economic growth over inflation control for now. That is the dilemma. And that is the scary part. If headline and core CPI is increasing, the economy is slowing down, that easily could be a recipe for inflation. So we will see what happens, but the only other footnote is it's not just the United States. And a lot of money is fleeing the United States in a way, like the dollar's been devalued lately. People are afraid the tariffs are going to hurt us. The tariffs are going to help us. The other countries have been benefiting from tariffs, but the main point here is about debt. You say, oh, no, I need to get out of the United States because we have all these massive unfunded liabilities. Well, guess what? I've looked at countries around the world in South America, in Europe, in Asia, and they're very similar or worse situations. Their retirement plans are very similar in terms of underfunded, like our Social Security is, but they've also promised free, mostly free, I'll say, because only one is really totally free, but mostly free healthcare to aging populations. And somebody, the Comptroller General, former David Walker, argued on his show, which I visited this week, that he said, oh, they'll cut back on benefits. Yeah, you can only do that so much. You promise your population free care, you can cut back a little, but if you cut it all back, there's going to be a revolution in some of these countries. So they're under the gun and they don't have the wealth, at least the United States, to sort of eat it. So I think we're still, as somebody said on the show, the worst horse at the glue factory. I think somebody mentioned that. In other words, all the countries have similar issues and it's going to be a worldwide effect. But I think the United States will weather the storm better than most because of our wealth and because at least we have some funding for Social Security, and the tariff and a lot of things will benefit us. So, most interesting story of the week segment. I was going to do a report on the recent story that 95% of companies using AI are finding it is not profitable at all. But I'm going to save that to October 14th because that'll take a long discussion. But this week I saw something in a Kiplinger magazine, which I like. I think it's great to follow updates on taxes and things like that and follow what's going on, among others. So they were talking about the specifics of the big, beautiful bill, and I caught some specifics about the tax cuts. So obviously we all know, or many people know, there's no tax on tips coming. No tax on overtime. These should be very popular with young people, with people who work overtime, and restaurant workers. And also, there's no tax on car loan interest. I'm not sure that'll be that popular, but maybe it's fair. But there is a new tax deduction for seniors, which many may have heard of. So here's the actual new rule. Effective for 2025 through 2028. So this is 25, 26, 27, 28, 4 years at least. Individuals who are 65 and older may claim an additional deduction of $6,000. This new deduction is in addition to the current additional standard deduction for seniors. So you get your regular deduction, which went up a reasonable amount this year, and now it's an additional $6,000 for many people. It says that $6,000 senior deduction is eligible per individual, and that's $12,000 deduction for a married couple. The deduction phases out for taxpayers with modified adjusted gross income, which is complicated, but basically it's your adjusted gross income, like from your tax return, with some adjustments like adding muni bond interest, a couple other tweaks maybe. So it phases out if your income is over $75,000 single or $150,000 for joint filers, but that phase out is over a long period. Like for instance, for the joint filers, it's $150 to $250. So a lot of people are going to get extra deductions. This was supposed to be an offset to Social Security taxes, and it will be in effect for at least 3 or 4 years. It should help juice the economy a little by creating some cash flow too. So we'll see, about that effect. But it's certainly going to help a lot of people. Well, next segment, why President Trump or someone in the White House should give me a call segment. Is a short one this week, but the big, beautiful bill was generally well designed in many ways. It really was. I mean, there were a lot of things. in it that I thought were good. As a matter of fact, I wrote a report that was 30 pages that was reviewed but not endorsed by the Controller General of the currency, and he didn't make that many changes. Maybe he made in the 30-page report 12 changes, something like that were of any substance at all. He didn't say he liked the report because politics, he didn't endorse it. But in any case, they took and used about maybe half the ideas from this 30-page report, but there were a lot of ideas that still could be used. And a perfect example is that it wasn't included enough, and there was more specific in the report, but basically we need industry-specific tax benefits for two industry groups. Number one, industries that are necessity-based like food. So we need special tax breaks for food producers to make sure that if interest rates and inflation affect people will have good food supplies, as an example. The other thing is, and this is more specific, we have to look at industries that are interest rate sensitive, more interest rate sensitive, like housing as an example, and stimulate that. Everybody knows we have a housing shortage. I had a specific idea in the report about how to give tax credits to builders who are building more than one house in a 2-year period. And we need to do that. Okay, we get to more concrete thing for the investor. Investments of the week. So normally I talk about one, but I'll explain in a minute. First, disclaimers: Wall Street Hackers is for entertainment only. These are only our opinions. There are no guarantees on any of our suggestions, because there's no guarantees on any suggestions, basically, unless you hold them bond to maturity, which we don't think is a bad idea either. At the moment, consult your financial advisor. So since we're taking the break until October 14th, rather than go into one specific investment, because we'll have plenty of new viewers, especially I think on TikTok, I'm going to go into a general overview of some of our favorite allocations and food for thought for the investor. Number one, MPLX, which is a limited partnership MLP. It does pipelines for natural gas and oil. I love the stock, and it's bizarrely underpriced. I read an article, a comment by one analyst or owner, and he said it's delusionary, like the market is delusionary about this. I can't find another stock like it, but maybe you can, but I wish I could. Anyway, because of the combination of yield, growth in income, and the industry. So it's got a 7.6% yield that's easily covered by cash flow. As a matter of fact, if you add the cash flows from what they're reinvesting, they're probably about a 20% cash flow in terms of that, because they're easily covering their dividend by 1.5 times, and they're reinvesting about the same amount as their dividend. So if you add 7.6, and maybe another 3 or 4, getting close to 20% cash flow. That's unbelievable in what should be a very safe industry, because what they're doing is just pumping natural gas, which is about a third, in oil for cars in the United States. I just can't see anything like it, and I look all the time, obviously. Number two idea is treasuries inside an IRA or Roth IRA. And I'm not saying put it all in there. It depends on your taste for risk. But if the market is going to return perhaps 3 to 6%, nobody really knows, but some of the predictions are that, as I mentioned, over the next decade annually, why not take 4.5%, 4.7% safe bet and use it as a ballast for your portfolio? That's guaranteed money if you go long term. And principal may vary, but you have that cash flow. It's not a bad idea, for diversification, certainly. Idea number 3. This was actually covered in Barron's last week, a week after I talked about it. So there's unusually high returns for municipal bonds relative to interest rates right now. And you're rewarded, in the article, they said, for taking credit risk, which I don't like, or for going long. So long-term general obligation muni bonds, that means the whole entity, like a state, is on the line for the money. So if you go with long-term general obligation muni bonds in safe states, very safe states, I don't know, like Texas, New Hampshire, Washington, Delaware, you can get well over 4% federal tax-free. You have to go long to get that kind, but even if you go shorter, then you're still getting a good tax-free yield, especially if you are making money in other areas and you have a higher tax bracket. These are very safe general obligation bonds. Number 4, smaller allocation to FRT, Federal Realty Trust, which I recommended maybe a month ago. Maybe it's up 8% already, but I still like it a lot. It has a yield of 4.4%. It's a REIT, real estate trust, and it's very safe. I believe extremely safe because it's open air shopping centers, which is the way to go. And it's many have grocery anchors. It has a great dividend history. And so you get a very likely growing dividend starting at 4.4 over the years. It's a small allocation, partly because I just love MPLX so much. If I didn't have that much MPLX, maybe I'd be putting more into FRT, but I personally threw FRT into my IRA. But you win either way, most likely. The point I bring out, too, is that with FRT, what I really like is they go with very, very high income areas. So these are the people who are probably going to be shopping no matter what the macroeconomic economy is doing. If you're in a very wealthy area, people still go out to restaurants. Their lifestyle won't be affected, or they'll be the last ones anyway. So all these are some ideas that can be successful in any macro environment. Hopefully we won't have stagflation, although I think it's quite possible. We won't have inflation, which I think is possible too, unfortunately. But I think you can make money in either, and you have to prepare for anything because nobody can tell you the actual situation. To sum this up, there's never been so much debt on one side. On the other side, you have some very positive forces. AI, which I think is overrated, but it is going to make companies more efficient. And you also have demographics and aging population. I think you also have a lot of boomers and people who are retiring who are underestimating what they'll need to live throughout their lives. And so they may have to cut back eventually. There's so many different factors. We're in the fastest rate of change and nobody could argue this, in history, without a doubt. Technology is changing, demographics are changing, there's geopolitics, there's so much unpredictable. So this is why you want a little diversification and a lot of safety, in my opinion. So we begin with our panel question of the week, and we'll bring on Mark Lee. Mark?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, I don't see it, but I can hear you. I'll start, and you can probably create the visual. Okay, so here I'll begin. Recently, Charles Gasparino, there you go, wrote an article. He's on TV sometimes, writes articles, called, quote, "Okay, let the lefty win," in which he said, quote, "Just sit tight and let the ill-equipped Maoist Zoran Momdani win in November." Background first. Oh, and the question first, then I'll give you the background, then we'll get Mark on. Question is Gasparino right or wrong? I mean, he's just saying, let Momdani win and sit tight. So here's what the background is. First of all, Momdani's ideas and policies are out of sync with most Americans. There is no doubt about it, although some people love him. He's anti-police. He's soft on crime. He's for cashless bail. He is anti-charter schools, I believe. That's what I've heard. He loves rent control for all. He wants to government control groceries. He's basically more, in many ways, a communist than a socialist on ideas. He is sharply allied with Bernie Sanders and AOC. But it's not just his communist or socialist leanings that have to be pointed out, but also he has almost no real world experience. He was born in a very wealthy family, and he's hardly had a job or had a job in his life. So he's just like talking. So here's a perfect example of very recently. He was asked, what about a failed government grocery store in Kansas? And here's his response. He said, for every failed government grocery store, there's someone with an idea to create one. It's like, what? That is so illogical. What he should have said is, no, there's success. But no, he's just saying somebody else has this idea, but it failed. It's like, who could think this? And he has a good chance of being mayor of New York City. So just to finish what Gasparino said, and then we're going to discuss if Gasparino is right or wrong. Let him unleash, quotes, these are selected quotes, let him unleash his socialist policies on the masses to teach them a valuable lesson, both economic and cultural, about wokeness and progressivism, and more broadly, a stranglehold on the Democratic Party. A fleeing middle class, let Mamdani's policies force businesses and prod more upper and middle class residents to flee. Let the city declare bankruptcy, which will happen if Mamdani gets his way. We can then start from scratch. Detroit did it, and the last time I was there, its downtown was pristine. So, Mark, there's no right answer to this. What do you think? Is Gasparino right or wrong?
I'm trying to figure out the actual nature of the question. I mean, you're talking about, because I did read earlier that a lot of developers are coming to the aid of Cuomo and everything along those lines and trying to get Cuomo elected, because that would be the other candidate and all along those lines. So we'll see if that happens.
Wait, Mark, I'll just give you a footnote. Right now, Mamdani, it looks like almost a shoo-in. Today's poll had him at 44% popularity. You've got Cuomo trailing by a lot. You've got Adams, who doesn't want to drop out, and he's got a bit, and Sliwa on the Republican side. When you split those three, Mamdani's almost at half. Right? It could change, but right now Mamdani's got the chance. But the real question is Gasparino saying, and I think I know his logic too. His logic is let New York fail. One, as an example, and two, I think there's those that will argue nationally this will help the nation, because if you're a conservative, you don't like socialism, and say, okay, watch New York foil and it'll be an example. But what do you think? Do you think Gasparino is right or wrong?
Well, the flip side of that can be that it can go in the opposite direction, because, like I said, I don't know enough about Mamdani's plans for the city. But let's just say hypothetically that his plans and some of his plans come to fruition and they actually make for a better New York. And I actually know people in New York area and all along those lines. And he is not as bad, because basically what he's saying is that to let him win because it will be an utter failure and everything. But we know that that isn't always the case, because I've seen some people come in that have been more moderate than they were actually perceived to be, or have even been more liberal than they were perceived to be. So we don't know what could happen. So it might end up being that it becomes a major windfall for the Democratic Party if it works out in their favor, and we won't know.
Well, I agree with almost everything you said there as a possibility. It didn't occur to me, but that's a very good point. Look, a lot of politicians say a lot of things. I mean, I will say this: if half the stuff he's saying is true, I mean, if you're going to attack charter schools, if you're going to actually, New York's got problems already with crime and, a lot of issues with, all kind of issues, but it's also doing pretty well compared to some of the other cities like Chicago and LA for its own reasons. But if he really says, oh, I'm going to massively tax businesses, and it's not going to go well, probably, but you're right. You never know. People say things. He could get into office and change his mind. I mean, again, he's from a rich family, has no experience. He might get into office and say, and maybe he might say, oh, I said this stuff, but now I'm going to modify it a lot. The other side is hanging out with AOC and Bernie Sanders. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. But so I'll give you my answer, and you might be surprised, but I think it's a really bad idea. No. And one, I'm going to assume that it's not good for New York, but I'll give you the fact that maybe it won't be as bad as I think. But it's a bad idea to just say, okay, we'll just not worry about it and elect them, and, because it'll be a good national example. By the way, it will be. What I'm sure of is nationally, it's going to hurt the Democratic Party, because now Trump is going to be able to talk about Mamdani and everything he said on a different show. I quoted him. His quotes are incredibly, naive, just like totally socialist, totally communist, But I mean, he's for public controlled grocery stores. This happened in Russia, and people were on 4-hour lines to get bread. But I'm not saying he's going to do it, because you have a great point. He might just be talking and get into office and say, now I got to really be careful about politics because I want to be in office for 8 years.
Well, I mean, I know you wrap up and everything along those lines, but just really quickly in that same space here in Durham, and Durham is considered a very liberal town. That's where I'm at and everything. There are
Sure.
several restaurants that are co-op restaurants that are very popular and everything. So if you talk
They're
about
not
co-op
government
restaurants,
run.
they huh?
Co-op is not government run.
No, they're not government run, but they
No,
are.
I love co-op stuff.
Right.
That just means there are different people. That's a whole nother model. That works. Socialism has a history.
Socialism doesn't work, and like I said, he may be thinking about the co-op model and everything. Just really quickly, and I'll just make this point really quickly because I know you've got limited time. But that I have a former mayor here in Durham. I saw him at an event and everything, and he actually had a comment to your point and everything because I was asking him. I said, "Is there something that you approved that you wish you hadn't approved?" And he looked at me because he's a family friend. It was actually at a family event. It was my dad's birthday party and all along those lines. And he said, yeah, there's some things that I wish that I had not approved. I won't tell you what they are, but there are some things that I wish that I had not approved. Okay. And I'm sure that many politicians are like that.
Yeah, there's a chance he'll change his positions, but assuming he doesn't, I still think it's a bad idea. And let me explain why. Okay. Because New York's a diverse economy. If he does start bringing it down, and he might not, but there is a risk of that for sure. And I think it's more likely that, you need good management, and it's hard to say, but let's say he starts hurting New York. If he does, which I'll give you, maybe he won't do these things he's saying. But if he does, he's going to start driving business out, and people, as a matter of fact, I'll give you a footnote. People in the real estate values in Connecticut and upstate New York are booming. There's a lot of people moving out of New York now all of a sudden because they're afraid, but that might be a reason why. But anyway, here's the bottom line. There are millions of people whose lives are going to be affected. One, mm-hmm. If New York falls apart, it's going to take a decade. He might start a cycle that can't be broken, but it doesn't make sense to just say, yeah, we'll elect him and not worry about it. So I totally disagree with Gasparino. And even in terms of a national example, I don't think the value is going to be as much as you would think, although I think Trump can play off it, by what he said and what's happening. Because the thing is, if progressive leftists would just Google, does socialism ever work, in thousands of years and hundreds of examples, it's just one more example. I mean, socialism and communism has failed because the governments get so much power, they take over, or they just mismanage things. And the only example that anybody can talk about is the Scandinavian countries. And those countries, one, have so much rich resources. They have fisheries, they have farmland, they have had oil. But what's going to happen now is they've been relying on a lot of cheap oil from the North Sea, but the North Sea has hit peak oil. Norwegian production has been going down since 2004. When they don't have that aid, maybe socialism is going to fail. And plus, so we will see. But the bottom line is, I predict if he's elected, which he probably will be, I think New York will be in a downward spiral, but I don't think it's a good idea. But that said, you know what? I'll eat my words if he doesn't do these crazy things. But if he does half of them, I think we've got issues. I mean, I think you'd agree on some of the issues. Like, look, one last one. I'll just ask you now, just out of curiosity. Cashless bail for criminals. That's a big thing in New York, and he's in favor of it. It's like, so you're a criminal, maybe you've been, committed 15 crimes, and this is a turnstile of crime. The same guy gets in, out, and now you're going to trust the guy to come back? I think bail's you agree with cashless bail or not?
Not so much cashless bail, but I have seen some bail models where they have had people get out or help their bail funds reduced, or definitely even done some bail programs and things along those lines. Because even Reverend Barber has had some programs around that and all along those lines. So, like I said, I'd be curious.
No, I think case by case you can have reduced bail. There's no doubt about it. I agree with that too. But I don't think everybody. Look, I don't think everybody should have cashless bail. It's like I don't want to trust a murderer, a kidnapper, whatever. If you get bail, whatever.
But I mean, just really quickly, I know that even here in Durham, like I said, Durham's a very liberal town. There were times where women that were incarcerated, particularly like around Mother's Day and everything like that, they had some bail programs where they were allowed out because of some of their situations and a lot
That's
of
different. That's temporary release. That's another thing. But
Right.
all right, you know what? That was good discussion, Mark. And you made a very good point. I'll leave it for you about maybe Mamdani won't do all this stuff, or maybe he'll be successful. You never know. It's always hard to predict the future. As to paraphrase Yogi Berra, the hardest thing to predict is the future, something like that. Anyway, we'll be back October 14th. Thanks, Mark, and thanks for watching. As Kim always says, get healthy, get wealthy, and we'll see you in about 4 weeks. Thanks, Mark.
See you. No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.